All right, so thanks for coming out today, Jimmy. Wanted to sit down with you and get some thoughts on your announcing your candidacy for Cobb Sheriff. Let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to here in Cobb.
Okay, my name is James Herndon. I go by Jimmy. I'm originally from southern Georgia. Grew up in the Valdosta region. Graduated from Cobb County High School. Nobody seems to know where that's at. It's kind of Class A school in the middle of nowhere, but that's where I'm from. Went to college at Valdosta State. Got a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, a Master's degree in Criminal Justice, and then later on finished up a Master of Public Administration while I was working for the Cobb Sheriff's Office. I moved to Cobb County in 2001, began working for the Cobb Sheriff's Office, and I worked there until the end of 2017. I left the Cobb Sheriff's Office to find better employment, and I knew under our civil service rules that I cannot run for sheriff and work for Cobb County, or especially the sheriff, so I had to leave one way or the other. So I did so. I don't care for the way the office is currently being run. I don't really find that it has very effective leadership. In my experience, Neil Warren doesn't run the office. He lets his underlings run it and doesn't really know what's going on day to day, which is a huge problem. To give that much power to your people and not knowing what they're doing. Just over the years going back, I can just say that I only seen him twice, I believe, and that's at swearing-in ceremonies. He was not at any of my graduations, any of my promotions, any of my award ceremonies, nothing. So that's at least my perspective. I just never saw the man. I just believe Cobb County can do a lot better. I think he's mainly there to just hold on to power. He likes grabbing headlines. And if you're doing your job right, I don't think the sheriff should be in the newspaper. Shouldn't really know you exist unless someone needs help from you. And the sheriff seems to get in the paper quite a bit for some reason, and that's contrary to the way I believe it should be run.
Yeah. And thanks for being that candid. Yesterday I reached out to you and tried to get your opinion. Walmart and now Kroger has made the announcement here that they are wanting folks to not bring guns into the stores. Walmart is also not going to sell ammunition. I think completely guns completely in Alaska, for example. Your comments there about Mr. Warren politicizing the role of sheriff. How do you respond to this recent news here?
Well, that's a private business. They can do what they want. I think reading some of the articles I read, they are asking people not to openly carry firearms. And I get that. That makes people uncomfortable. And it's their private business. They can do it. And a sheriff really shouldn't have any say in that. Like I've said, people have heard me say before, your job is to enforce the law, not legislate it. That's just the way you're supposed to do. You follow the law, you don't make laws. But those are private businesses. They can actually ban people from having any firearms in the premises as they want to with appropriate signage and asking the people to leave. Doesn't seem like they're quite going that far. They're just asking, don't carry it out in the open. Because I think it makes some people uncomfortable that aren't familiar with guns, and that's totally fine. Yeah, it's a reasonable request, I think.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I see the signs at times. Going into banks and such, you'll see a little sign, no handguns permitted here. What is the implication if someone does not follow the wishes of that private business?
You can go to jail for criminal trespass at that point. That's the same as if someone came in my house doing something I didn't want them to do, and I asked them, say, hey, there's conditions in here in my house. I don't want you carrying that gun in here. And if they keep there and they don't leave when you ask them to, then they're trespassing, and you go to jail at that point.
Gotcha.
It's silly to do that. I'm pretty sure the probate court would yank your license for violating those laws as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a silly thing to do, and most people that I know, obviously law enforcement and everything, know that carried weapons, they don't carry them out in the open. It just seems like, to me, if you carry them out in the open, you want the attention, you want people to see you're armed. And I don't really understand the purpose in that. I mean, I carried on and off duty for years, and the only time I carried out in the open where you had to see it is because I was required to in that holster. But the rest of the time, no one would ever know I had a weapon on because I don't want that kind of attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this just goes back to a story of my uncle. The one time we were at my grandparents' house at the time, and he wanted to show off his gun, and it went off accidentally and almost killed the cat in the house.
Yeah.
The unqualified people that are handling some of these guns is definitely concerning at times.
I wish Georgia would require people to be trained one way or the other better. I mean, we train people how to do almost everything else, but for firearms, something that's, I mean, handguns are designed to kill other human beings. That's what they're for in close quarters. That's just, we can dance around that, but that's what they're made for. Yeah, I think training would be beneficial. I know if I want to go hunting in the state of Georgia, I have to take a hunter safety course over several days and get that, and I have to get a license to go hunting. But if I want to buy a firearm for any other purpose, specifically to engage other human beings, I need no training. That seems a little weird. I think we could do better there, but that's not my job to make the law. I just work with what's in place.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. Again, as just point back to what you said earlier, you as sheriff, you were there to enforce the law.
Yes.
And the politicizing. As far as I mean, I'm from South Georgia as well. I remember sheriffs always being elected in Georgia. This is not something new.
Yes.
But there are other roles of the sheriff too. That I think this is why that's been that way for quite some time. If you want to talk a little more about that.
Well, Office of Sheriff. I mean, if you want to go back way back, it's a throwback to Old English law that we brought here to the United States, English common law that our system's based on. So the Office of Sheriff existed in England all the way back to Robin Hood. If you remember, he was having the spat with the sheriff there. So the Office of Sheriff started off as not only a law enforcement officer, but also a tax collector. The king had the sheriff collecting taxes. I think only one system is still that way in the United States, and that's in West Virginia. So same place you can go to jail is the same place you pay your taxes. It's a little strange. But here in Georgia, the sheriff has unique duties of carrying out a lot of the civil responsibilities of the court. So if you win a lawsuit and you don't want to pay, the sheriff can be ordered to go to your house and seize things to bring back to the courthouse to sell at public auction. They can seize properties with order of the court and sell them by order of the court. None of this is unilaterally. They can't do it on their own. It's all has to be approved by the judges. When someone gets a protection order against them, the judge orders the sheriff to go to that home, help the parties separate. And it's usually the person that's accused of committing the crime, or even if they haven't been charged with committing the acts, they're escorted out and they're allowed to get their things, and it's a peaceful, that's why the sheriff's there. And Cobb County, the court usually orders us to take the firearms temporarily. Firearms are cataloged, inventory. The current sheriff does the same thing. They put them in a vault. When the case is over with, they get their firearms back. So considered they're not a convicted felon, they can legally have those firearms. The sheriff in Cobb does all the mental health commitments. So if someone is having a mental health crisis and they don't feel they can get themselves to a facility, or they're a threat to themselves right now, the Cobb Sheriff sends people, it's 2 to 3 deputies. They go, they meet with the person, and they just simply transport them to, whether it be Ridgeview or Peachford Hospital or something like that. They're not handcuffed or anything like that unless they have to be where they're violent. They just are simply given a ride. The sheriff has to do that as well. Here in Cobb, the sheriff runs a narcotics unit as well, and the purpose in that, I understand that, is so you can deputize all of the different agencies and they can work out outside their boundaries. So otherwise you would have Marietta stuck to Marietta, Powder Springs stuck to Powder Springs, but by deputizing them under the sheriff's umbrella, they can work everywhere.
Even like the local city municipalities and police departments.
Yes, and a sheriff, unlike a local police officer, has statewide jurisdiction. So like, for example, when I was on the fugitive unit, if I'm hunting someone here from Cobb County who committed a murder and they flee to Savannah, I can track and pursue him to Savannah and arrest him and bring him back. They do that all the time, all over the state.
Interesting.
Outside of the state, you've got to get the other state to help you, but if they're within the borders of the state of Georgia, there's nowhere a sheriff can't go to go get them.
Yeah, so those are interesting stories to see why some could argue on both sides. Is this still an elected position? Is it still, the other? But to politicize a role like this, that's quite a stretch. And I don't think you see it very often either.
No, it's a constitutional position, so it has to exist according to the Georgia Constitution, no matter what. So if Cobb County Police today said, we quit, we're out of the policing business, we're done, then the sheriff automatically, that's his job, takes over wherever there's not police protection at anymore. Cobb's unique in that they have a county police force. So outside the metro area, the sheriff runs everything, does all the patrolling, everything. Here, go back to that, here in Cobb, the sheriff primarily serves all the warrants, serves all the civil papers, does all the writs, evictions, mental health transports. They run the jail, they run the courts, they run the juvenile courts. They do all that. They come and go and get prisoners from all over the state.
Mm-hmm.
So if a wanted person is arrested in, say, Waycross, Georgia, well, we can't put it on Waycross to hold that person at our detainee and have them transport them up. We go get them and we bring them back to Cobb County.
Mm-hmm.
They would do the same thing in their sheriff's office. But yeah, if you're doing it right, other than running for election, you have to tell people who you are and what you're about. The rest of the time, you shouldn't be, in my opinion, that your name just shouldn't come up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, just to talk about your opponent a little bit, going back to some stats that the AJC has run here, just alone the issues that Mr. Warren, Earl Earhart, Sam Olens, went down at Kennesaw State, just to bring some folks up to date. When this was in the past year or two, the cheerleaders on the football field, they decided to kneel on the field. And this ended up coming into some open records requests, trying to see, who was pressuring Sam Olens to do this. The AJC is saying that at least 161 hours were spent at taxpayer expense, and at least from $40,000 to $80,000 of tax dollars spent because folks like your opponent decided to politicize their role. And because as an elected official, they kind of by proxy get some legal protections.
Yes.
Because of their actions when they do these things. So I didn't know if you had any other comments kind of continuing along what we talked about earlier.
I don't think he should have gotten legal protection in that, because his whole thing is I think himself in the article somewhere, it says that he's acting as a private citizen exercising his First Amendment right to disagree with him. But where it comes into a problem where the county, I believe, had to get involved is because he used the power of his office. Because you can't just pick the phone up on a weekend and text our state rep.
Right.
So he picks his phone up, his county issued phone, obviously, because that's how they got the text, because they're subject to open records. And he texts and calls another lawmaker and tells them, I want something done about this. And sure enough, he uses the power of his office, and then that state rep uses his power to flex on the university president, and it just rolls downhill from there. And you're not really exercising your First Amendment as a private citizen, and you're using the power of your office to crush a bunch of little kids.
Yeah.
And who cares? I mean, it's no different than I'm sitting at home watching TV and I watch somebody do something. That's not what I'm there for. And if that's what they want to do, it takes a minute and a half. That's not really going to affect me, and I can go on about my day because I'm there to watch a football game. And if they want to do that and the university allows them to do it, that's their business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this hit home for me, and when we talked about this, my master's is from Southern Poly, who was later merged into Kennesaw State, and I was an adjunct professor. My day job is I do software training, but they agreed to have me teach there, and it was almost like a trifecta. That went down, campus carry went down, and there was I'll call her troublesome student. It was like a trifecta hit all at once, and I remember sending, Neil Warren was on an email, and because the quote, if I'm not mistaken, not directly, he said, these teachers at Kennesaw State need to be more busy educating students about the flag. And I immediately, when I saw that, my head just almost exploded. And I sent him an email and I said, if you have a better way of teaching these students, be my guest. And of course, he never bothered to respond to that email whatsoever. But again, it goes back to this overall theme that you've responded to politicize a role like that.
Yeah, you should just stay out of that.
Yeah. Thanks again. I'll just kind of recap here. Were there any other, well, let me go back to your law enforcement experience. Are there any stories and you don't necessarily have to name names or what have you, but are there any stories that are relevant to any of these topics that have come up in your law enforcement experience?
I mean, there's several different things. Working there, I believe there's more than a dozen people that Sheriff Warren has kept on staff after they've been arrested for misdemeanor and felony offenses. They're there now. Everything from spousal abuse, and federal law says they can't continue to carry guns, so it appears he just created a brand new position out of the air for them and stuck them in the warehouse. The warehouse tends to be where they send all the little land of forgotten toys they forget about. There's another deputy, he's now on the SWAT team. He got a DUI, he had a hit and run. I mean, he drilled the back of a tractor trailer, got out severely injured, and basically jogged home, and then realized how bad he was hurt and he was going to have to call in. He left his badge and gun sitting on the front seat, so that made it real easy for the police to track down who he was. And he spent a year or two in the warehouse, working as a warehouse worker, and then was made a deputy again, put on the SWAT team, the whole 9 yards. You've got the incident that was in the paper, a deputy driving all the way down 6 hours to Florida to Tallahassee to confront who he thought was his daughter's boyfriend because he wanted to know if he'd hurt her. So he was wearing his Cobb-issued vest, Cobb-issued firearm, and used that to assault the guy. And Tallahassee Police Department arrested him on the spot and noted he was wearing his body armor. And they took him to jail. So you've got law enforcement agencies that have investigated and deemed that these people committed a crime enough that they need to be removed from society and booked into a jail. But then he turns around and creates another position for them. I know of another supervisor, a very high-ranking command staff supervisor, that was out in Paulding County in his take-home car, and according to the Georgia State Patrol, was well in excess of the speed limit, hit and killed someone. This is not the state trooper case. This is something different. And for whatever reason, this never really made the news. Killed someone, though. And he was indicted, which means they presented it before a grand jury. They all, a bunch of people together, said, yes, he did this and he needs to face trial for vehicular homicide. And he kept him on staff the entire time. He's still there now. I don't know whatever happened with the case, but if you're indicted and the Georgia State Patrol, in my experience, their reconstruction team, if they say you did this, you did it. I mean, they're at the tip top of the echelon of people that do reconstructions. I don't know of anybody better.
Well, they're Georgia's FBI.
If something happened to me, that's who I would want investigating a wreck that I was involved in because they get it right. Not saying that they necessarily didn't, but usually that's been my experience. That bothers me a lot. I kept seeing all these people stay on staff after stuff like this. And some of them went on to do worse things, like the Jason Bill, if you remember several years ago, the deputy that raped an immigrant girl. Background on that, this is probably 2008-ish maybe. Deputy Bill had been stopped by the Cobb County Police for DUI a few weeks earlier, and instead of them taking him to jail, they turned him over to a supervisor. There's a report out there on it. Just says the officer remarks that Bill was not capable of driving and didn't seem like he could drive and all this. It's everything short of saying it's a DUI, because once you write those magic words in a report, he'd have to go to jail. So they tow his car away and they turn him over to a sheriff's office supervisor. You know that's not done without permission from way up top. Well, then he's brought back to work and he's put on light duty, sitting there at the checkpoint, if you've ever been through there. And I asked him what happened. He told me what happened. He said he was supposed to act like his knee hurt and limp around. I said, really? Okay, whatever. So he didn't last that long. They had him on that because of the alcohol. And while he was on light duty, he went and used his firearm as soon as he got it back. Kidnapped a waitress right there on Pat Mill Road, took her back to his apartment, beat her, raped her, used the sheriff's office handcuffs to subdue her. And I mean, this went on all day and night. He got a life sentence out of that. The sheriff did fire him, but I don't think he had any choice with him being in custody with no bond. There's just a lot of that. There's another case where Sergeant Christopher Travis, he was arrested for it's rape in the state of Georgia, and you have custody and control over a person and you use that authority to have sex with them. It's not consensual when you control every aspect of their lives. He had people on work release and probationers come over to his house that he would arrange and have sex with them, but the problem is they were wearing ankle monitors, so it made it really easy to figure out. Well, part of the problem with that case is I was the initial investigator on that. Did a search warrant. He lived in Paulding County to seize his computers and stuff, see if he'd been communicating with more girls and stuff like that. And seized his computer, brought it back to Cobb. Under procedural law, it means I need an additional search warrant if I want to search the computer itself. My supervisors wouldn't listen to me, wouldn't have it. Just no. I said, let's take it over to Cobb PD. They're a mile down the road, and they have a high-tech crime unit, and they're awesome at what they do. just great at what they do. Let them do it. They'll break this thing down in a heartbeat. I wasn't expecting anything like what was later found will never be found on there. So instead, they have me take it up to Cherokee County because we don't want to play nice with the police. That's the sheriff. This current sheriff has a huge problem with playing nice with the police. It's all about who gets credit for stuff. So they have me take it to Cherokee County. I take it to Cherokee County, and they said, hey, what's taking so long? I said, well, I need to get a search warrant. I'm waiting on the judge. You don't need to get a search warrant. You already had one in Paulding County. You don't know what you're talking about. It's like, you pay me to do this. This is what I know. This is what I do. I know what I'm talking about on this. Because when in doubt, you always take a search warrant out. You can't go wrong taking a search warrant. You can never go wrong. You can always potentially go wrong when you don't. The problem is you have judicial review, which I'll get to that in a minute with the 287G stuff. But you have a judge overlooking your stuff, and they say, yes, this is right, or no, this is not. You can't do it, and here's why you can't do it. That's what's nice. Judges tell cops no all the time. It's not like what people think if they're not doing it right. So I was removed from the case. Another guy was put on the case, and they searched the computer without a warrant. They found, to my knowledge, hundreds to thousands of child pornography videos. He would have went to federal prison for 30 years. And when I was subpoenaed by the federal magistrate, I talked to them. They asked me if I took a search warrant out of there. I said, no, I did not. They said, well, in your search warrant, did you specify that you were going to search the computer? I said, no, because that's not how it's done. And that case was dismissed.
How convenient.
Now, I believe the bad guy sued the sheriff on that one as well. There's tons of lawsuits out there, not just, you got the one out of the paper. There's lawsuits that come in every few months on the sheriff. It's part of it's a normal operation doing business. People are just going to sue you. Mm-hmm. You don't have anything else to do when you take a man's freedom away all day and he has nothing to do. He's going to find things that he feels are not right. That's his right under the law to bring a suit to fix it. And there's a lot of them, but I don't know how many of them get paid out or anything because that's all quiet. So,